Welcome to another nightmare narrative. Art of the Hitcher. Those who stop never reach their destination. Harvey had wandered far from his last encounter, now finding himself along the sun-bleached roads near the coast of Queensland, just past a place called Tin Can Bay. With the salty breeze and waves in the distance, he stood by the roadside, thumb out, waiting for his next ride. After a while, a battered ute pulled over the windows rolled down to reveal three burly teenage fishermen. Their faces were tanned and weathered, their energy loud and brash. "You need a lift, mate," one called out. Harvey's instincts immediately tingled with unease. He glanced at the group, sizing them up. They were rowdy, their voices tinged with a hint of mockery. Trouble, he thought. His usual approach wouldn't work here. Calmly, he shook his head. "No thanks," Harvey said, keeping his tone polite but firm. "I see there's a few of you in the car. I'll wait for the next one. It'll be all right." The lads exchanged glances, their expressions shifting to irritation. "What's that supposed to mean?" one of them snapped. "You too good for our car or something?" "No," Harvey replied evenly, his hands raised slightly. "Just think it's better if I wait." But the teens weren't satisfied. They'd gone out of their way to stop for him, and his refusal felt like an insult. The driver leaned out of the window, his voice rising. "Oi, we bothered to pull over, mate. You're hitchhiking. You don't get to be picky." Another voice joined in, more aggressive. "Get in the bloody car. We are doing you a favor." Harvey's calm demeanor didn't waver. "I appreciate the offer," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not getting in." The driver slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. The doors flew open, and all three young men piled out, their faces twisted in anger and excitement. One of them, a tall boy with a shaved head, pointed a finger at Harvey and sneered, "Bet he's the hitchhiker killer they've been talking about." The accusation hung in the air for a moment, thick with tension. Harvey's heart sank. He may have been a killer, but he wasn't much of a fighter. And judging by the fire in their eyes, these lads weren't about to let him walk away unscathed. "Listen, fellas," Harvey started, raising his hands in a defensive gesture, but his words were drowned out by the explosion of violence. The first punch landed hard against his jaw, sending him stumbling back. Another fist followed, hitting his ribs. The blows came fast, each one driving him further down until he collapsed to the ground. "You think you're smart, huh? Too good to ride with us?" one of the boys shouted, kicking Harvey in the side. The others joined in, their boots slamming into him with brutal force. Harvey curled up, trying to protect his head and chest, but there was no escape from their fury. Each kick seemed to come harder than the last, and soon, he was covered in blood, his face swollen and unrecognizable. "All right, enough," one of them finally yelled, grabbing his friends by their shirts and pulling them back. "You're gonna kill him if you keep going." The others hesitated, breathing heavily, their fists still clenched. Slowly, they backed off, their anger giving way to a nervous energy. "Drag him down to the beach," one said, and the others nodded. They grabbed Harvey by the arms and legs, hauling his limp, blooded body toward the shoreline. The sand was cool beneath him as they dropped him unceremoniously near the waterline, leaving him sprawled in the wet grit. Without another word, the boys turned back to their car, brushing off the sand and blood on their hands. They piled in, their laughter and bravado returning as they roared off, leaving Harvey behind under the blazing sun. The ocean breeze carried away the echoes of the assault, leaving only the sound of the tide and the seagulls circling overhead. Harvey sprawled on the gritty shore for hours, slipping in and out of consciousness. When he finally came to, he panicked. His body ached in ways he hadn't thought possible, and every movement sent sharp jolts of pain through his battered frame. But one thought pierced through the fog. "Where's my bag?" Groaning, he forced himself upright, his blooded hands trembling as he scanned his surroundings. His eyes followed the trail of dark stains in the sand leading back to the roadside. Ignoring the searing pain in his ribs, he stumbled toward the spot where he had been attacked. As luck, or perhaps fate, would have it, his medical bag lay undisturbed in the scrub near the edge of the road. Relief washed over him as he snatched it up, cradling it close to his chest. The contents appeared intact, untouched. But the thought of those thugs possibly having looked inside set his teeth on edge. They'll regret this, he thought darkly, his anger bubbling beneath his battered surface. But revenge would have to wait. He shuffled back toward the main road, eventually spotting a small, weathered public amenities block near the shore. Staggering inside, he braced himself against the sink, splashing his blooded face with cold water. The reflection in the cracked mirror startled him. Swollen eyes, a split lip, and a bruised face. He looked monstrous, unrecognizable. No one's going to pick up a hitchhiker looking like this. Harvey knew he needed to lay low. With no way to travel safely in his current state, he'd have to stay put until the swelling subsided and his wounds healed. After rummaging through his bag for a cleaner shirt to cover the worst of the blood, he made his way to a modest guest house he had spotted earlier. After a few days of resting and recuperating, Harvey settled into the rhythm of life at the guest house. His wounds were healing, and though his face still bore bruises, they were fading into shades that drew less attention. During his stay, he mingled with other guests, feigning a friendly demeanor. It didn't take long for him to discover that fishing was a popular pastime in the area. One evening, over casual conversation, Harvey asked about the best fishing spots nearby. The locals, eager to share their knowledge, rattled off a few prime locations. Quiet, scenic places where the fish practically jumped onto the line. As dusk fell that evening, Harvey decided to give it a try. Armed with a cheap rod he'd picked up at a local store, he headed to the water. It had been years since he'd held a fishing rod, but the quietness of the activity calmed him. Yet, as relaxing as the act seemed, Harvey wasn't just fishing for fish. He was casting his net for something much darker. For the next several nights, he continued his excursions, haunting the various fishing spots in the area. He chatted with the occasional passerby and observed the ebb and flow of life along the coast, all while quietly searching for familiar faces. It took a week, but finally, his patience paid off. There they were, gathered at the end of the pier, the thugs who had beaten him to within an inch of his life. Harvey froze for a moment, gripping his rod tightly as a wave of recognition and rage coursed through him. Even in the dim light, he could tell it was them. Their loud voices carried across the water, their boisterous energy as obnoxious as he remembered. He sat on a nearby bench, pretending to adjust his fishing gear as he watched them from the corner of his eye. He needed a plan. Rushing in would be foolish. There were 3 of them and only one of him. And while they might not remember him in his current state, he couldn't risk revealing himself too soon. Harvey's mind began to work, as the sea breeze cooled his skin and the waves lapped gently against the pier. Patience, he thought. It had served him well before, and it would serve him again. The trap didn't need to be sprung tonight. It required the right bait. Harvey meticulously hatched his plan as he watched the 3 boys laughing and chatting at the end of the pier, their silhouettes faintly illuminated by the dim glow of the nearby streetlights. He adjusted his cap and slid his glasses into place, ensuring his appearance was nondescript. With his medical bag slung over one shoulder and a backpack over the other, he set out toward the pier, adopting the casual demeanor of someone intent on a peaceful night of fishing. The night was eerily still, with only the occasional splash of water against the wooden posts to break the silence. From his position, Harvey could faintly make out snippets of their conversation, their youthful voices carrying through the cool, crisp air. He knew, however, that dealing with 3 of them at once would be a challenge, even for someone as calculated as himself. His mind raced for a way to thin their numbers, his fingers tightening around the strap of his bag as he waited for an opportunity to present itself. It wasn't long before one of the boys announced, with a casual laugh, that he needed to go for a slash. Harvey's ears perked up, his pulse quickening as he saw the boy break away from the group and head toward the toilet block at the far end of the pier. Calmly but deliberately, Harvey followed, keeping enough distance to avoid arousing suspicion. The faint creak of the wooden boards beneath his feet was almost drowned out by the gentle rustle of the breeze. As the boy disappeared into the shadows of the toilet block, Harvey took a steadying breath, his movements smooth and rehearsed. He waited until he could hear the unmistakable sound of the boy urinating before making his move. Silent as a predator, he slipped behind the unsuspecting youth and plunged the needle into his back with practiced precision. The boy barely had time to gasp before the sedative took hold, his body crumpling to the cold, damp floor in a matter of seconds. Wasting no time, Harvey grabbed him by the arms and dragged him into one of the stalls, the scrape of the boy's sneakers against the tiles echoing faintly in the space. With a grunt of effort, he positioned the body in a way that wouldn't immediately attract attention, locking the stall door from the inside. Then, with surprising agility, he climbed over the top of the stall and dropped quietly to the ground on the other side. Satisfied that his work had gone unnoticed, Harvey returned to his car, parked discreetly in the nearby car park. He settled into the driver's seat, his eyes fixed on the remaining two boys as they continued to chat and laugh, blissfully unaware that their companion wasn't coming back. All Harvey had to do now was wait. Harvey watched intently as the two remaining boys began making their way down the pier, their footsteps heavy with an uneasy tension. He recognized their car instantly, the same one that had stopped to give him a lift on that horrific day, the day everything changed. The memory of their cruel laughter and the pain of their fists flashed vividly in his mind, fueling the cold determination that coursed through him now. With a steady hand, he prepared 2 syringes, each filled with the same potent sedative that had already subdued their friend. Slipping through the shadows, he made his way to their vehicle, his movements quiet and precise. The backseat door was unlocked, just as he'd hoped. He slid inside, crouching low and pressing himself into the darkness, hidden beneath an old blanket that reeked faintly of spilled soda and damp upholstery. As the boys approached, their voices carried over the night breeze, tinged with a mix of frustration and concern. "Are you sure you checked the toilets?" one of them asked, his tone sharp, edged with doubt. "Of course I did," the other replied, his voice defensive. "There was no one in there, just some guy using the toilet. I even called out, but it wasn't him. If it was, he would have answered me." "Then where is he?" the first boy shot back, exasperated. "He said he was cold. Maybe he just went back to get a jumper or something. But he's not answering any of his messages. Man, that's not normal." There was a pause as the realization seemed to settle over them, heavy and unspoken. Finally, one of them sighed. "We should just head back home. Maybe he'll show up there." The car doors opened, and the two boys climbed inside, their voices quieter now, weighed down by uncertainty. Harvey stayed perfectly still, listening to the creak of the seats as they settled in, the click of their seatbelts, and the hum of the engine as it sputtered to life. His grip tightened around the syringes hidden in his hands, his pulse steady. Harvey knew the time to strike was close. He crouched low in the backseat, his breath shallow, the syringes ready in his hands. The engine growled to life, and the hum of the car filled the silence, masking his movements. He waited, counting the seconds, the darkness of the backseat wrapping around him like a cloak. With a sudden, deliberate motion, Harvey reached his hand around the driver's seat and plunged the needle into the driver's thigh. The sharp prick startled the boy, who instinctively glanced down. "Fuck!" the driver hissed, his voice laced with confusion and pain. Before the passenger could fully react, Harvey shifted his weight and jabbed the second syringe into his leg, his movements smooth and calculated. What's going on?" the passenger stammered, his words slurring even as the sedative began to take hold. His head lolled back against the seat as he tried to turn and see who, or what, was behind him. Harvey stayed perfectly still, pressing himself into the shadows as he watched them succumb, their bodies growing limp and unresponsive. The driver's hands slackened on the wheel, the car's engine still idling as he slumped forward. The passenger's confused murmurs faded into silence as his head tipped to the side, his breathing slow and shallow. Satisfied, Harvey finally allowed himself to sit up, the syringes now empty in his hands. He carefully placed them back in his bag, his movements methodical and unhurried. The car was silent now, save for the soft hum of the engine and the distant sound of waves lapping against the pier. For a moment, he lingered, his eyes scanning the unconscious boys as a faint, almost imperceptible smile curled at the corner of his lips. Everything was going according to plan. Harvey had been playing this one a bit by ear. He had the boys unconscious and at his mercy, but now came the tricky part, where to stash 3 bodies without drawing attention. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, the faint hum of the car engine underscoring his thoughts. After a moment of deliberation, he drove back toward the toilet block. The first step was simple: deal with the boy already inside. Harvey parked the car in a dimly lit corner and slipped out, moving with the same quiet efficiency that had served him so well. He shimmied back under the locked stall door, just as he had earlier, and unlocked it from the inside. Dragging the limp youth out wasn't easy, but Harvey had the strength that adrenaline and purpose provided. He hauled the body across the cold, damp ground and deposited it in the car's boot with a thud, wiping his hands on his trousers as he closed the lid. That's when he noticed the tent strapped to the roof of the boy's car. It was a 4-man tent, complete with sleeping bags and pillows. It felt almost providential, like some small blessing to make his work easier. "Perfect," Harvey muttered, a faint smile on his lips. He recalled seeing a sign for Poverty Point, a free campsite nearby. If memory served, it would do nicely. Harvey drove the boy's car carefully, making sure to avoid drawing any undue attention. The road to the campsite was dark, bordered by dense trees that swayed gently in the breeze. The site was nearly empty, just as he'd hoped. He selected a secluded spot at the edge of the clearing, far from the few other campers scattered across the grounds. Setting up the tent took some effort in the dim light, but Harvey worked quickly, his movements calm and deliberate. It was surprisingly spacious, with enough room to comfortably fit 4 people. The sleeping bags and pillows were a welcome bonus, as was the small flashlight he found tucked into the gear. "These boys came prepared," he muttered with a chuckle, the sound low and dry. Once Harvey had pitched the tent, he waited patiently, biding his time until the area fell silent and the coast was clear. The darkness deepened, and the distant murmur of voices from other campers eventually faded into nothingness. Harvey moved efficiently as he opened the boot and retrieved the first boy's body. He carried him into the tent, placing him on one of the sleeping bags, then returned to the car for the others and positioned their bodies as though they were merely sleeping campers. The tent now held all 3 boys. 2 had chests rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. Harvey stood at the entrance for a moment, surveying his handiwork. The scene was almost serene, like a picture of friends on a weekend getaway. But Harvey had something special planned for these boys. Harvey hadn't given 2 of the boys the full strength of tranquilizer, and he knew they'd be awake soon. That was exactly what he wanted: party time. Grabbing a knife, he sliced through 2 of the nylon tent guide ropes and used them to tie the boys up. Not too tight, just enough to keep them in place. They'd still be drowsy from the sedative, so he didn't expect much trouble. He positioned himself cross-legged on the damp ground, directly in front of them. The campsite was eerily silent, save for the soft rustle of the trees and the distant crashing of waves against the shoreline. The first boy stirred, his eyelids fluttered open. As soon as the boy's eyes met Harvey's, the confusion on his face gave way to fear. The second boy followed moments later, blinking groggily before his focus settled on the lifeless body of their friend sprawled across the clearing. A dark pool of blood spread beneath the corpse, soaking into the dirt like spilt wine. "Ah, you're awake," Harvey said, his tone light, almost jovial. "Welcome back, boys." The boys struggled weakly against the ropes, their movements sluggish. One tried to speak, but only a faint, strangled sound escaped his lips. "Oh, don't bother," Harvey said with a grin. "Your vocal cords are still too relaxed from the tranquilizer. It's fine. I'll do the talking for now." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What were you boys thinking? Huh? At least you were prepared for your little weekend getaway. Tents, snacks, the whole shebang. Makes my job much easier." The boys' eyes darted around, desperation evident in their faces. Harvey chuckled. "Oh, this is rich. You're looking for a way out, aren't you? There isn't one. You're stuck with me now. And honestly, this is all on you. Let's review, shall we? First mistake. When I said I didn't want a lift, you should have driven away. Simple. No drama. But no. You idiots decide to get out of your car and play heroes. You beat me half to death because you thought I was a serial killer. And you know what? You were probably right." Harvey paused, his expression shifting to mock seriousness. "But then, this part is my favorite. You drag me to the beach and leave me there. Huge mistake. Do you know why? I hate sand. It's coarse, it's gritty, and it gets everywhere. And the next mistake? Oh, this is a classic. You leave my belongings on the side of the road. My beloved tools of the trade. The very things that make me who I am." He gestured dramatically as if presenting a grand revelation. "So, let's break it down. You find a serial killer. You beat him up. You leave him alive. And you leave him with his tools. Does that make any sense to you?" He shook his head, feigning disbelief. "No, that's insanity. Honestly, I think you boys are crazier than I am." One of the boys' mouths twitched as though he were trying to speak. Harvey tilted his head, intrigued. "Oh, you're getting there. Your vocal cords should be back online any minute now. But don't strain yourself. I'm enjoying this one-sided conversation." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Here's what I'm curious about. What kind of facial expression do you like? Shock? Fear? Maybe a touch of despair? I'm a fan of creating masterpieces. Facial expressions are pure magic." Harvey reached into his bag and pulled out his surgical knife, holding it up to catch the moonlight. "We are going to have so much fun, boys." The boys' muffled cries grew louder as the tranquilizer continued to wear off. Harvey's grin widened, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The night was still young, and he had all the time in the world. Harvey's gaze shifted to the lifeless body lying nearby. "Now, this one," he said, gesturing to the corpse, "doesn't get to decide. He's dead. I couldn't ask him about his favorite facial expression. Sad. But we should give him a thumbs up. What do you think?" Before the boys could respond, not that they had much choice, with precise, almost clinical movements, he severed the corpse's thumb and placed it neatly on its chest. The other two boys watched in horror, their faces pale and their bodies trembling. "You know what? I remember him kicking me in the gut," Harvey mused. "Bit of an asshole, that one." He crouched by the body and began undoing the dead boy's shoes. He worked methodically, removing the shoes and socks before tugging down the trousers and underwear. One of the boys finally found his voice. "What the fuck, man?" he croaked. "You're going to rape a dead body?" Harvey froze, then threw his head back and laughed. "Rape? Necrophilia? Do I look like the kind of guy who'd stoop to that?" He shook his head, wiping a tear from his eye. "Come on, give me some credit. I'm not into necromancy." He snorted. "No, no, no. This," he held up the severed thumb, inspecting it with mock seriousness, "is going somewhere with artistic merit." The boys stared in disbelief as Harvey crouched over the body again. "He was an asshole," Harvey muttered, almost to himself. So, it's only fitting we give him a tribute. With a grotesque flourish, Harvey inserted the thumb into the corpse's rectum. He stood up, brushing his hands off on his trousers. There. Perfect. A real thumbs up from beyond the grave. His grin stretched wider as he turned back to the horrified boys. See? It's all about the details. Now, where were we? Anyway, back to you two, Harvey said, fixing his unblinking gaze on the boys. So, what's your favorite facial expression? The first boy stammered. This is fucked. This whole thing is fucked. We won't say anything, I swear. Harvey chuckled, his voice dripping with mock disbelief. What? I've just killed your mate, cut off his thumb, and shoved it up his bum, and you're not going to say anything? Come on, boys, that's just ridiculous. Let's be a little creative here. He leaned closer, his shadow looming over the boys. Now, what's your favorite expression? Don't be shy. I'm giving you a chance to participate in something memorable. I don't know, the boy exclaimed, his voice cracking under his fear. Sure, you do, Harvey said, tapping his temple as if prompting an epiphany. Your favorite facial expression. Don't worry if you can't pick one. You, he said, pointing at the boy with trembling hands, look like a mustache type of guy. Classic. Timeless. Then he turned his attention to the quieter boy, who hadn't spoken. And you? Harvey paused, tilting his head in mock contemplation. Oh, bugger. Some people's vocal cords take longer to recover. That's a shame. But we don't have time to wait for you to find your voice. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. Let's go with a smiley face for you. Or no, wait, a sad face. You've got that tragic, brooding thing going on. Perfect. Harvey straightened up, stretching his arms dramatically. Anyway, better get on with it. I've bored you two enough with my chit-chat. And let's be honest, you don't seem like the conversational type. Thanks for the tent, by the way. Very considerate of you. With that, he drew up 2 syringes, carefully filling them with a lethal dose. Now, let's make you comfortable while I work on my masterpieces. He administered one syringe, then the other, all while grinning as if they were part of a twisted game. The night was far from over, and Harvey had plans to ensure it would be unforgettable. For him, at least. Harvey removed some of the boy's hair and used that as an outline for his masterpiece. Next, he cut high on the youth's lip, extracting his lip and mustache. He placed them and then removed the bottom lip and placed that, followed by the boy's eyes. Once complete, he positioned the faces on the sleeping bags. Harvey was quite pleased with what he had created. He considered spending the night in the tent, but it was a little too cramped, so he returned to their car and spent a few hours sleeping in the back seat. The police had worked out by now that he must be moving from place to place. When they found Karen's body, they tried to predict his next destination. They had a fair idea of what he looked like and had set up a roadblock on the highway where they thought he might pass through. Officers stood at checkpoints, conducting random breath tests and checking registrations, but Harvey was nowhere to be found. Maybe he'd changed his pattern or stopped altogether. Or, they feared, this was just the calm before another storm. Harvey didn't return to the guest house where he'd been staying. He'd paid cash for his room and left without a trace. His injuries had healed nicely by then, and he was back on the move. Meanwhile, the local policeman at Kalula had grown concerned. He'd been patrolling the area for days and noticed no one had entered or exited a particular tent. It had been eerily quiet for over a week. Deciding to investigate, he parked his car and approached the campsite. On approaching, a sickeningly familiar stench wafted through the air, the unmistakable odor of death. Unzipping the tent, the officer recoiled, immediately calling for backup. Forensics arrived within hours and began processing the scene. The bodies were in various stages of decay, but one detail stood out. It took time to locate the missing thumb, but when they turned over the corpse and removed the clothing, they found it shoved into the youth's rectum. The investigators exchanged grim looks. This was unlike anything they'd seen in Harvey's prior killings. After determining the times of death, they theorized that two of the youths might have been alive to witness what Harvey had done to their friend. Interviews with the boys' parents revealed a curious detail. They'd returned home a week before with blooded fists, claiming they'd been in a fight. The connection seemed tenuous, but it quickly became evident that this encounter might have sparked Harvey's wrath. Search teams scoured the area for signs of a struggle. With the help of sniffer dogs, they eventually located a spot where one of the boys had torn his shirt. Beneath a rock, they found a small but crucial blood sample, Harvey's. Finally, they had his DNA. For the first time, they could put a name to the monstrous figure haunting their nightmares. Further inquiries led them to the guest house where Harvey had stayed. The owner described a man recovering from severe injuries, claiming he'd been in a motorcycle accident. This revelation helped investigators work out a timeline, and it explained why their previous assumptions about his movements had been off. Even with this breakthrough, one chilling fact remained. Harvey was still out there, somewhere, waiting for his next move. And the clock was ticking. Remember to like, subscribe and share to others, so you don't miss an episode.